The Ghost and Mrs. Muir, 1968 to 1970, showed us that love and friendship can transcend even death. But for the cast, that was only true on screen. In real life, many of them faced career collapses and hidden health crises the world has long forgotten. Here's why they've changed so drastically by 2026. Hope Lange as Carolyn Muir. Hope Lange was born on November 28, 1933, in Redding, Connecticut, USA. At just 34 years old, she took on the role of Carolyn Muir, a widowed mother navigating life, loneliness, and an unexpected connection with a ghost, in The Ghost and Mrs. Muir, 1968 to 1970. The role defined her television legacy, earning her 2 consecutive Emmy Awards and cementing her as one of the most compelling leading women of her era. Her early life was shaped by both privilege and quiet loss. Born into a theatrical family, Lange was introduced to the stage at an early age, performing on Broadway by the time she was 9. But everything shifted when her father died the same year, forcing the family to adapt quickly. They stayed in New York, running a small restaurant where Hope waited tables alongside her siblings. Even as a child, she balanced survival and ambition, studying dance, modeling, and acting, slowly building the foundation of a career that would rise faster than she could control. Her personal life, however, unfolded with far more turbulence than her early success suggested. She married actor Don Murray in 1956, but the marriage collapsed within 5 years as her career accelerated. What followed was a complicated relationship with Glenn Ford, then another marriage to director Alan J. Pakula, which also ended in divorce. Each relationship seemed to begin with promise and end in emotional strain, pulling her in different directions between love and career. It wasn't until later, with producer Charles Hollerith, that she finally found a sense of stability, but only after years of emotional upheaval had already left their mark. In her later years, the struggles became physical. Lange developed ischemic colitis, a serious condition that disrupts blood flow to the intestines. What began as a medical issue quickly escalated into a life-threatening infection. Despite treatment, her condition worsened, and her body could no longer keep up with the damage. The illness that took hold quietly became the final chapter of a life that had already endured so much beneath the surface. Hope Lange passed away on December 19, 2003, in Santa Monica, California, at the age of 70. She was cremated, leaving behind a legacy that stretched from Broadway stages to Hollywood films and into television history. With an estimated net worth of around $5 million, her life stands as a story of early brilliance, emotional battles, and a lasting impact that outlived the roles she once fought to protect. Edward Mulhare as Captain Daniel Gregg. Edward Mulhare was born on April 8, 1923, in Cork, Ireland. At 45, he portrayed Captain Daniel Gregg, a charming, mysterious sea captain whose spirit lingers between worlds, in The Ghost and Mrs. Muir, 1968 to 1970. His performance brought elegance and depth to the character, making him one of the most memorable presences in the series. His early life did not begin in the arts, but it quickly turned toward it. Mulhare initially studied medicine at the National University of Ireland, a path that suggested stability and tradition. But something pulled him toward the stage instead. Leaving that secure future behind, he immersed himself in theater, first in Ireland, then in London, working alongside giants like Orson Welles. His breakthrough came with My Fair Lady, where he performed the role of Professor Higgins in approximately 1,000 stage performances, a demanding run that required consistency, discipline, and endurance few actors could sustain. Unlike his on-screen romantic image, Mulhare's real-life relationships were notably absent. He never married and had no children, despite being widely known in entertainment circles as a charismatic and attractive figure. His life moved from stage to stage, from country to country, but never settled into the traditional patterns many expected. The absence of a long-term partner did not create public scandal, but it left behind a quiet sense of distance, one that mirrored the solitary elegance he often portrayed on screen. That quiet distance followed him into his final years, where a far more visible struggle emerged. A long-time heavy smoker, Mulhare was diagnosed with lung cancer and faced a rapid decline. Within just 5 months, the disease progressed aggressively, leaving little time for recovery. The strength that had carried him through decades of performance could not hold against the physical toll of illness. Edward Mulhare died on May 24, 1997, at his home in Van Nuys, California, at the age of 74. He was later laid to rest in Cork, Ireland, returning to the place where his journey had begun. With an estimated net worth of around $3 million, his life reflects a career built on discipline, presence, and quiet resilience, marked not by chaos, but by a lifelong sense of solitude behind the spotlight. Reta Shaw as Martha Grant. Reta Shaw was born on September 13, 1912, in South Paris, Maine, USA. At 56 years old, she played Martha Grant, Carolyn Muir's blunt, loyal housekeeper and the practical backbone of the household, in The Ghost and Mrs. Muir, 1968 to 1970. She gave the series a strong pulse, because every time the story drifted into fantasy, Martha pulled it back to earth. Her childhood sounds gentle at first, but it already carried the strange mix that would define her screen image. She grew up in a musical family, with a father who was an orchestra conductor, and she later said she had practically been raised on a Ouija board, because the women around her believed deeply in spiritualism. She sang in church, acted in amateur plays, graduated from Paris High School in 1929, and then trained seriously at the Leland Powers School of the Theater in Boston. That unusual blend of religion, performance, and the supernatural made it almost eerie that she would later become so memorable in projects like The Ghost and Mrs. Muir and The Ghost and Mr. Chicken. Her marriage did not have the same strength as the women she played. Shaw married actor William A. Forrester, and they had a daughter, Catherine Ann Forrester, but the marriage ended in divorce. However, she kept working through it, moving from Broadway productions like The Pajama Game to film roles like Mrs. Brill in Mary Poppins, building a career out of resilience more than glamour. Then came the illness that slowly stole the force people remembered her for. Shaw developed emphysema, a chronic lung disease that makes each breath more difficult than the last. By the time she reached her final years, the disease had reduced the physical power that had once made her so unforgettable on television and in film. Reta Shaw died on January 8, 1982, in Encino, California, at the age of 69. She left behind a career filled with supporting roles that often stole entire scenes, and her estimated net worth at the time of her death was around $2 million. Charles Nelson Reilly as Claymore Gregg. Charles Nelson Reilly was born on January 13, 1931, in New York City, USA. At about 37 years old, he played Claymore Gregg, Captain Gregg's fussy, flustered descendant and one of the show's comic troublemakers, in The Ghost and Mrs. Muir, 1968 to 1970. His timing gave the series a nervous spark, and he made even chaos look carefully performed. His childhood was marked by one terrifying moment that never truly left him. In 1944, when he was just 13, Reilly was at the Hartford Circus fire, the disaster that killed 167 people and traumatized him for life. After that, crowds terrified him, and even as a successful director later on, he preferred to sit near exits or in the back of a theater. He also built puppet shows as a boy and dreamed of becoming an opera singer, but that dream collapsed when he realized he did not have the voice for a major operatic career. So he turned toward acting instead, and that detour led him to Broadway hits like Bye Bye Birdie, Hello Dolly, and How to Succeed in Business Without Really Trying, which won him a Tony Award in 1962. His love life was far more complicated than the jokes he told on television. Reilly never married, but he spent years with Patrick Hughes, his longtime partner. For much of the 1970s and 1980s, he buried that gay truth behind wit, flamboyance, and relentless self-mockery on shows like Match Game. He did not publicly come out until 2000, after decades of silence, which means much of his adult life was spent performing not just for audiences, but for survival. In the end, it was not scandal or controversy that stopped him, but illness. While filming The Life of Reilly in 2004, he was hit with severe respiratory problems that forced him to retire immediately after shooting ended. His health kept worsening, he missed public appearances, and the comeback that should have felt triumphant became overshadowed by hospitalization. By the time the film was being praised, Reilly was already too sick to enjoy the full weight of that late recognition. Charles Nelson Reilly died on May 25, 2007, at UCLA Medical Center at the age of 76 from complications of pneumonia. His estimated net worth at the time of his death was around $3 million, built across Broadway, television, directing, and teaching. Guy Raymond as Mr. Peavy. Guy Raymond was born on July 1, 1911, in Niagara Falls, New York, USA. At around 57 to 59 years old, he played Mr. Peavy, the quiet, dependable handyman who seemed to know everything happening in town, in The Ghost and Mrs. Muir, 1968 to 1970. His presence was subtle but essential, giving the show a sense of everyday life that made the supernatural feel believable. But behind that calm, almost invisible role was a man who had already lived multiple lives before Hollywood ever noticed him. At just 15, Raymond stepped onto the stage as a comedy dancer, spending 14 years chasing applause with his body before slowly being pushed aside by age and shifting trends. When dancing faded, he reinvented himself as an actor. He later appeared in films like Gypsy and The Undefeated. That tension followed him into his personal life. In 1969, during his time on The Ghost and Mrs. Muir, he married actress Anne Morgan Gilbert, a woman who understood the instability of the business all too well. 2 actors, 2 careers, 1 fragile balance. They had to build a life while constantly chasing roles, auditions, and opportunities that could disappear overnight. As the years passed, the struggle became less visible but no less real. Raymond continued working steadily in television, often returning as familiar faces across different series, yet never escaping the label of supporting actor. It meant steady income, but also a lifetime of standing just outside the spotlight, watching others become legends. Guy Raymond died at the age of 85 on January 26, 1997, in Santa Monica, California. At the time of his death, his net worth was estimated at around $1 million. Dabbs Greer as Norrie Coolidge. Dabbs Greer was born on April 2, 1917, in Fairview, Missouri, USA. At about 51 years old, he played Norrie Coolidge, the steady, reliable sheriff who brought order to chaos, in The Ghost and Mrs. Muir, 1968 to 1970. His calm authority grounded the show, making even the strangest moments feel real and controlled. But his real story was not about control, it was about persistence. Greer never chased fame in the traditional sense. Instead, he built his career piece by piece, role by role, until he became one of the most recognizable, unrecognized faces in Hollywood. He appeared in hundreds of television episodes, from Gunsmoke to The Twilight Zone, always present, always dependable, but rarely the one audiences remembered first. In his later years, that long road began to show its cost. Greer's health declined under the weight of age, as kidney failure and heart disease slowly weakened him. Even after a powerful late-career moment in The Green Mile, where he portrayed an elderly man reflecting on his past, the role felt almost painfully close to reality. Dabbs Greer died at the age of 90 on April 28, 2007, at Huntington Hospital in Pasadena, California. He was laid to rest at Peace Valley Cemetery in Missouri, returning to his roots after a lifetime spent moving from set to set. His net worth was estimated at around $1 million, a surprisingly small figure for someone who appeared in nearly 700 productions, proving that sometimes the most hard-working faces in Hollywood are the ones history remembers the quietest. James McCallion as Abner. James McCallion was born on September 27, 1918, in Derry, Ireland. At around 50 years old, he played Abner, a working-class man connected to the town's daily life, in The Ghost and Mrs. Muir, 1968 to 1970. His role was brief, but helped complete the social world around Carolyn Muir, making the setting feel real and grounded. Right after that, his career tells a much bigger story. McCallion had already spent more than 40 years acting, starting at age 7 and stepping onto Broadway by 9 in Yours Truly, 1927. By the 1950s to 60s, he appeared in over 100 television programs, including The Twilight Zone and National Velvet, where he took on steady supporting roles that required constant adaptation. As the years moved forward, the workload never really slowed down, but his body began to struggle. McCallion developed kidney failure, a condition that required ongoing treatment and gradually reduced his physical strength. Even during this period, he continued appearing in television productions, relying on decades of experience to carry him through demanding schedules. But the strain built up, and the combination of illness and age pushed his system to its limit. James McCallion died at the age of 72 on July 11, 1991, at Valley Presbyterian Hospital in Van Nuys, California, after suffering a heart attack linked to his kidney condition. His passing marked the end of a career that stretched across more than 5 decades, from Broadway stages to over 100 television appearances. His net worth was estimated at around $500,000, reflecting a lifetime of steady work rather than headline success. William Lanteau as Seth Duncan. William Lanteau was born on November 12, 1922, in St. Johnsbury, Vermont, USA. At around 46 years old, he played Seth Duncan, a local townsman who contributed to the everyday life surrounding the main story, in The Ghost and Mrs. Muir, 1968 to 1970. His role supported the structure of the series, helping connect the supernatural elements to a believable community. From there, his career expanded through sheer volume and consistency. Lanteau appeared in more than 80 television series, including The Andy Griffith Show, The Twilight Zone, Perry Mason, and The Waltons, building a reputation as a reliable character actor. On film, he took roles in Lil Abner, 1959, Hotel, 1967, and later On Golden Pond, 1981, where he played Charlie the Mail Carrier. As he aged, the physical demands of that long career began to take effect. Lanteau eventually required heart surgery, a serious procedure that carried high risk, especially later in life. Although the surgery was intended to stabilize his condition, complications developed afterward, and his recovery did not progress as expected. The situation deteriorated quickly, turning a planned medical intervention into a life-threatening outcome. William Lanteau died at the age of 70 on November 3, 1993, due to complications from heart surgery. His career had spanned nearly 4 decades across television and film, with appearances in dozens of well-known productions. His net worth was estimated at around $800,000, a figure that reflects a long and consistent working life in Hollywood rather than short-term fame. Kathleen Hughes as Mrs. Coburn. Kathleen Hughes was born on November 14, 1928, in Hollywood, California, USA. At around 40 years old, she played Mrs. Coburn, a refined, upper-class woman connected to the social circle around Carolyn Muir, in The Ghost and Mrs. Muir, 1968 to 1970. Her appearances, though limited, added a polished contrast to the show's quieter emotional tone. Right after that, her career reveals a different kind of pressure. Hughes was locked into a 7-year contract with 20th Century Fox and appeared in at least 14 films, followed by multiple roles at Universal, including the cult hit It Came from Outer Space, 1953. She moved constantly between film and television, appearing in series like Alfred Hitchcock Presents and Perry Mason, often playing supporting roles that demanded precision but rarely gave her the spotlight. The workload was relentless, and the expectation was clear: stay visible or disappear. In her personal life, however, she held on to something rare in Hollywood. In 1954, she married producer Stanley Rubin, and unlike many relationships in the industry, theirs lasted 59 years and produced 4 children. While she continued acting in television and projects like Bracken's World, Rubin's influence also shaped parts of her career, keeping her connected to the industry from both sides of the camera. The marriage did not collapse under pressure. It endured, even as the industry around them changed. That stability extended into her later years, where her life slowed but remained intact. Kathleen Hughes lived a long life, witnessing the full rise and transformation of Hollywood from its golden age to modern television. She passed away at the age of 96 on May 19, 2025. At the time of her death, her net worth was estimated at around $1 million, reflecting a steady career and a rare personal life that remained unbroken in an industry known for tearing people apart. Dan Tobin as Mr. Hampton / Dr. Ryan McNally. Dan Tobin was born on October 19, 1910, in Cincinnati, Ohio, USA. At around 58 years old, he appeared as Mr. Hampton, a refined gentleman, and Dr. Ryan McNally, a composed medical figure, in The Ghost and Mrs. Muir, 1968 to 1970. His roles often carried a polite surface with a subtle edge, making his characters feel controlled yet slightly unpredictable. His early life followed a clear academic and artistic path. He studied at the University of Cincinnati before stepping onto the stage, making his Broadway debut in American Holiday in 1936. Within just a few years, he expanded internationally, joining a touring company in England and earning roles at London's Strand Theatre in Behind Your Back, 1937, and at the Theatre Royal, Haymarket in Mary Goes to Sea, 1938. By 1939, he returned to the United States and secured a role as Alexander Sandy Lord in the original Broadway production of The Philadelphia Story, placing him among the leading stage performers of that era. His personal life remained steady and closely tied to his profession. In 1951, Tobin married screenwriter Jean Holloway after meeting her on the set of The First 100 Years. Their marriage lasted 31 years until his death in 1982. During that time, he continued building a consistent career, appearing in at least 44 television productions, including regular roles in I Married Joan, My Favorite Husband, and later as the owner of Clay's Grill in the final season of Perry Mason, 1966. These roles required him to move constantly between sets, scripts, and productions across decades. As his career progressed into the 1970s, Tobin remained active, continuing to take supporting roles in both film and television. One of his final screen appearances was in footage for Orson Welles' The Other Side of the Wind, filmed in the early 1970s. Even though the film was not released until 2018, his participation showed that he was still working at a professional level more than 35 years after his Broadway debut. His later years reflected a gradual slowdown typical of long-term character actors who had spent decades maintaining steady screen presence. Dan Tobin died on November 26, 1982, in Santa Monica, California, at the age of 72. His estimated net worth at the time of his death was around $700,000, built through a career that stretched from Broadway in the 1930s to television and film roles across more than 4 decades. Gil Lamb, as Harvey/Harv Gil Lamb, was born on June 14, 1904, in Minneapolis, Minnesota, USA. At around 64 to 66 years old, he appeared as Harvey, also called Harv, a local townsman with a casual comedic presence, in The Ghost and Mrs. Muir, 1968 to 1970. His role added everyday realism to the seaside setting, often grounding scenes with humor and familiarity. His early career began long before film and television, rooted in vaudeville performance. Lamb developed a traveling act built around trick props and later a harmonica routine, which he performed across the United States and in multiple European countries before World War II. This was not occasional work. He spent years on the road, performing continuously in different cities. By the late 1930s and early 1940s, he transitioned to stage musicals, appearing in Broadway productions such as Folies Bergère, 1939, Hold On to Your Hats, 1940 to 1941, and later Sleepy Hollow, 1948. These productions required consistent live performance schedules, often running multiple shows per week. Instead of focusing on a single path, Lamb expanded into multiple areas of the entertainment business. Alongside acting, he owned a restaurant in New York and became part owner of a company that built theatrical props. At the same time, he appeared in more than 60 film and television productions between 1935 and 1980. His screen work included films like Hit Parade of 1947 and numerous television appearances, where he typically played supporting comedic roles that relied on timing developed during his vaudeville years. In his later career, Lamb remained active well into his 70s, continuing to appear on television and maintain connections in the industry. His ability to adapt, from live vaudeville to Broadway musicals, then to film and television, allowed him to sustain a career that lasted over 4 decades. Gil Lamb died on November 2, 1995, in Riverside, California, at the age of 91. His estimated net worth at the time of his death was around $500,000, reflecting a long and steady career built across stage, film, and television, rather than a single defining breakthrough. Nearly 6 decades after The Ghost and Mrs. Muir, 1968 to 1970, first aired, the faces we once knew have changed, but their stories have only grown deeper with time. Some found lasting success, others faced quiet struggles behind the scenes. But together, they left behind a legacy that still lingers like the spirit at Gull Cottage. So, which transformation surprised you the most after all these years? Let me know in the comments below. And if you enjoy uncovering the real stories behind classic stars, don't forget to like, subscribe, and join us for more Then and Now 2026 Journeys.